Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys for another episode of our Eat, Sleep, Arsenal, Repeat podcast. I think we're on. I try and count them, and then whenever I go to make like the little pre-record bit, I type a number and I'm like, I'm not sure. I've got into. I don't know if listeners will know about too much, but they should know because it's a very famous name. But Casey Neistat is a big like YouTuber. He did like a daily vlog where he's done like 500 daily episodes, and the running theme was that he would put a vlog number 257, but always get it wrong. And like the amount of comments left, like it's not that number. It's so frustrating, and I'm so worried now that people are going to think that this isn't. I think it's episode 7. I'm pretty sure it's episode 7. But as always, I'm joined by our fabulous guest this evening. First of all, Sophie, how are we? It was lovely to see you last week.
It was fantastic to see you both in Blighty. It was wonderful. I'm sure we'll touch on that just a little bit. And also, I'm crap at numbers, so I stopped numbering our episodes a very long time ago. I have Magic Mike do my maths for me.
Every day. Yeah, don't trust him. Don't trust him to do that. No, obviously, yeah, it's easier with like the daily morning shows because they're every day. But when you do it once a week, you're like, oh, what was it? We've been doing this for 7 weeks now, like nearly 2 months. So, yeah, amazing. Speaking of people that I saw recently, Owen, how are we?
I'm good, buddy. I'm good. Yeah, no, it's do you want to know what that lunch that we all went on? I'm sure everybody has seen the pictures on Twitter of the heavyweight lunch. Not just in terms of body mass with myself, you and Mike, but I love the tagline that was put up by someone during the meal, and it was like, "This is the greatest podcast that will never be heard," and that's exactly what it was. It was great fun to see us both, and obviously everyone else as well.
Joining us a little bit late, he tried to avoid us talking about London because he's so jealous. But we're also, of course, joined by Mr. Rush. How you doing, mate? You good, Joel?
Yeah, how about you guys?
Very good. You see how short he was with that response because he just doesn't want to hear us talk about London at all.
It's true.
Starting a GoFundMe for the doc.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm sure we'll get him over at some point. He's absolutely going to have to make a trip over to the UK. He's got to experience that first Arsenal fixture. Are you good, though? You well?
Yeah, I'm good. I might actually be doing some courses in London this year. So.
Oh, nice. No excuses then. You'll have to go over for one of the games. Absolutely. Of course, we're recording this the day after deadline day, which means this will go out to you a couple of days after it completed and finished. And it was a day. It was certainly filled with division and discussion and debates amongst the fan base, the 3Ds, if you like, of the Arsenal consortium of opinions. But in the end, Arsenal ended up making 3 signings overall in the window, bringing in Leandro Trossard, Jakub Kiwior, and of course, Jorginho. I'm going to get my guest thoughts on the window overall. So we'll start with you. Successful, not successful, somewhere in between. Where are we looking at?
I mean, I think when you acquire 2 experienced Premier League players to one of the youngest sides in the Premier League, and you are 5 points clear at the top with a game in hand and every opportunity to win the title, I find that it's a great bit of business. And no matter which way you splice the Jorginho thing, and I couldn't believe the absolute meltdown on the Twitter sphere when it was announced that we were in for him. I find this hard, like 28-year-olds and 31-year-olds now can't play football anymore and they shouldn't be signed and their knees are gone or their legs are gone. I've learned a lot of lessons in my first 18 months of the Arteta regime. And it's like one of those things where you just have to kind of put your sensible hat on here. And, Tuchel and Mancini would have very differing opinions to Arsenal fans about Jorginho and what he did for the Italian team at the Euros, which, by the way, he destroyed a player who, yes, is going to be the future and maybe hopefully a future midfielder at the Arsenal in Declan Rice. And same with the Champions League. He also brings leadership. Jorginho is one of those players where you haven't really heard anything bad about, right? And we know that Arteta's all about character. And I'll leave the tactical side to you guys. But when it comes to fitting into the culture, being part of a team, meshing well with players, especially at this part of the season, we know Arteta likes to work tight. To bring him in, he knows something. And he knows something because Pep Guardiola was after him, 2 seasons ago? He knows of him through Manchester City. He's had his eye on him. And this whole blaming Edu, and I reference you, Tom, and Gunner blog as well. It's like Arteta wanted Jorginho. This is not, a dude just saying, "Hey, I'm just going to buy someone because I couldn't get, Caicedo." So for me, I think it's a really good window. Trossard has already made an impact. I think he'd be great coming off the bench or deputizing for injury. We don't know much about Jakub. I saw your breakdown. Suit looks interesting, versatile. We have some, if there's a crisis, we have options maybe for the defensive midfield role outside of Jorginho as well. So I'm really happy. We needed to strengthen the side. I know we've lost some players and they've gone out, but surely most Arsenal fans think our bench is stronger at the end of this window. My goodness, I'm just thankful we bought players because after the meltdown, Tom, I don't know what fans would have done if we hadn't have got anyone.
Yeah, I mean, just a midfielder. If we'd not signed anyone on deadline day, my goodness, that would have been awful. Like, I can't imagine what would have happened. But thankfully, we don't have to worry about that. Owen, I don't know if you saw the tweet I put out this afternoon. I kind of was putting together like an Arsenal B team of players now you can put together. And I include Gabriel Jesus in that because for me, Eddie Nketiah is, our number one striker right now. So when Jesus comes back, he's got to fight for his place. And you can put a team together of players that don't necessarily start right now. You've got Turner, Tomiyasu, Holding, Kivior, Tierney, Jorginho, Smith Rowe, Fabio Vieira, Nelson, Trossard, Gabriel Jesus. I mean, that's depth. You can't say that we've not now got depth in this squad.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because in a sense that the depth thing has sort of snuck up on a lot of people, I think. Until you actually see that displayed in front of you. Not even that. Our starting 11 with a full bench is pretty impressive now when you look at it now. And my thoughts on this whole window, Tom, I know you know that I like a good analogy, okay? And this is where I sit. And
just not quad bikes is fine.
Just bear with me. Just bear with me, okay? So a few years ago, myself and my partner were obviously on the market for purchasing our first home. But as everybody knows in the UK, the housing market went absolutely crazy and it just wasn't viable to go and get the type of house that we wanted for the price that we wanted to pay. Now, did it mean that we had to stay static in the home that we were in, which was completely unsuitable for us and our young family at that time? No. What we did was we upgraded to a higher cost renting house to tie us over until the market settled down, which it has now. And we bought our house, our family home now. And essentially, that's what I think this transfer window has been for Arsenal. Everybody who's looking at these deals, the money that was going in for Caicedo, the money that was there from Mykhailo Mudryk, you just look all around the Premier League in particular, and the market is so inflated. You're talking now 60 plus million for, let's face it, okay, squad players at the minute. Mykhailo Mudryk, I don't think, came in and automatically started above anybody in this side, and I don't think Caicedo did either. So for me, when people are looking and saying show some ambition and pointing fingers at Edu and the ownership and saying go, these fees were just astronomically insane. And do you want to know what? For once in my life, I am so happy that the club haven't went and spent money stupidly, because something like this, Trossard, Jorginho, for example, everybody has to take into account that we've got 19 domestic matches left. In the
19. We're halfway,
19 in the Premier League this season. I don't hope that Thomas Partey is missing for 19 of those games. So hopefully, all fingers crossed, that we don't see Jorginho even start a game in the Premier League for the rest of the season. Now, if you're asking me if you would rather Mykhailo Mudryk and Moise Caicedo in the long term at Arsenal over the players that we have now, my answer would probably be yes, of course. 100%, but at the price is definitely not. And the caveat I'll put on that as well is that if you're asking me which one of those players do I think is going to have a bigger impact in the dressing room and not on the pitch whilst going towards a title charge in an already youthful squad, Jorginho and Trossard all day for me. So whilst it isn't the top targets, we didn't hit our top targets, it's obvious that it was because that those options just weren't viable and the club thought that those fees were getting astronomical. And for me, I think it's more impressive to see the club walk away and take the flak and have these short-term backup options in place than going ham and doing what Todd Bowley's doing and spending 25% of the entire transfer fund spent in the league. Transfer outlay in the league this season, which is just insane. So very. If I was to describe this window as anything, it may be underwhelming but sensible.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, especially consider the expectations and what was built up as expectation when we were putting in 70 plus £1 million bids for multiple players during the same window. So, yeah, I can absolutely see why perhaps it's not to the expectation that some people were looking at. Raj, how did you assess the business that we did and didn't do throughout January?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of similar to Owen, it was a smart, calculated window. We were willing to overpay, I think, even for Mikhailo, even for Caicedo, but within a reasonable extent. And so once it got to that point where it wasn't that, then they quickly turned to a contingency plan, and I think that shows great. I think Edu's shown that since the summer now, when things haven't worked out, he has a backup plan and option. So they showed that again this winter. And the other thing is, I think we have to remember, like, historically, January windows are extremely, extremely tough windows, right? Regardless of what Chelsea did, complete outlier. Even this is a complete outlier for Arsenal with, spending 50 million in a January window. And so I think Trossard is going to be a great deal. Just, we've already seen he's ready to hit the ground running. He's a different profile than Martinelli. Jorginho, I mean, what was that video like Cucurella, like they asked him who's the smartest player on the Chelsea team?
Yeah, that's brilliant.
That was brilliant. Brilliant.
Right? And
he's got...
yeah. And he's like, can I still choose him?
Yeah.
And so, but like that's an art, like that's that player, right? Is a high IQ, high awareness player, which is the same thing people were knocking Lokonga for, but suddenly like Jorginho is the exact opposite of Sambi in terms of his positional awareness, right? His ability to read danger and the way that we play. It's not like, you saw these clips of Jorginho like being slow, running. How often with this team are you seeing the like defensive mids or Partey having to run long distances? Yeah, a few times, right? The whole point here is with the press, with the positioning, is to be able to limit the amount of running you have to do, right? And that's all based on your positional sense. That's all based on being 1 or 2 steps ahead. And that's why you see Xhaka and Partey gobbling up these second balls, right? It's not because they're running vigorously. It's the move that they don't make that separates them. And that's why a lot of times with Lokonga, he gets in trouble because he starts tracking these runs that don't matter. That's why Odegaard's yelling at him, like, bro, what are you doing? Like, why are you still, wide on a run when Ake's clearly already turned his body? Like, that should be an automatic trigger. El Neni runs around a lot, but a lot of it is kind of pointless running. And so, it's much more about that positional awareness. And that's what Jorginho brings. I think with Kivior as well, fits the profile, right? Highly, highly versatile, high IQ player, great left foot, addresses the left center back need. So I think for 50 million overall, one, it doesn't affect the summer budget, which is great, but it still gives proper reinforcements for this window. And I think it also shows us the fact that they're wanting to go over, they're willing to go big for the right player. I think it bodes very, very well for the summer in going for multiple players, right? Because all the reports we've heard is that they're spending this window, even if it was a Caicedo or a Mudryk, it wouldn't have affected the summer window. So I think they're going to go. Obviously, Rice is kind of going to be the number one option. I think that's pretty clear, right? And then after that, I think they might go after someone else as well. So I think the funds are there, and now they've saved those funds for, like Owen said, right? Buying the house at the right time.
Yeah.
Tom, can I just add one thing about Jorginho as well, is that think about the media and pundits, and we all know that we're a dartboard and they're waiting for us to falter and fall. And no matter what we do, there's always going to be an arc or thread they find where they can criticize the Arsenal. The Jorginho signing blew me away in terms of the response from the pundits and from the media. Like hearing ex-players talk about shrewdness, players who kind of understand what he brings to the table. Super Kev was talking about him earlier today. You bring up Partey and running, and Kev was like, we saw Partey do that one long run. I think it was, was it against Tottenham? And so the response to that signing, to me, has been something that surprised me because of the fact of how people feel about us. But at the same time, they took off their, let's kill Arsenal hat and looked at it from the way they should have. And I think that is something that Arsenal fans should find a little bit of comfort in as well, maybe.
Yeah. It wasn't, I saw some of the arguments suggested like, Chelsea can't wait to get rid of this guy. That's not the case, and I think it was Fabrizio Romano's report in Caught Offside that I saw, which said that Chelsea see this as, quote, excellent business. And in my head, I'm going, if you give your city rivals a player that has a direct contribution to them winning the Premier League title, how on earth can that be viewed as excellent business? Was us letting Van Persie go on with a year left on his deal for £24 million to Man United, it's a good fee for a guy with a year left on his deal at that age and that year, sure, in that context. But to our historical rivals, to help them win the title, was that excellent? No, we don't look on it like that. And to be honest, 10 million to Todd Bowley's Chelsea is peanuts, at the end of the day. So I really don't get that side of the argument. But obviously what we know is that Jorginho can come in and I think provides us with much more quality than we had behind Partey initially. And that's no disrespect to El Neni. El Neni's a player, obviously, we know what you're going to get from him. You're going to get a 6 out of 10 every game. And he's very consistent. And he doesn't really put too many feet wrong at all, if any. But Jorginho gives us that different level above him, I think, to give us that competition to Partey, that in a season where you're looking for a Premier League title, it's going to be invaluable. And as you mentioned, Raj, the Cucurella video where he talks about his intelligence, that in this dressing room is going to be big.
There was even quotes today, I think, in The Athletic from Thiago Silva talking about how disappointed he was that Jorginho's gone. So clearly the guys in the game might know a little bit about the game. So see those guys, right? High level players. So they're all saying the same thing about Jorginho. So, 10 plus 2 if you win the Premier League, the add-on. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Right. 18-month contract. It's not like, right, it's a long-term deal either. And then last thing, his injury record is incredible. If you look at his injury record, I think he had four injuries, less than 2 games missed per injury. Over how many games? That's a testament to how seriously he takes the game, right? So I think, again, to the points made earlier is that, with Arteta, he values that professionalism a lot, and he understands how much you need role models on the team. I think Jorginho fits that bill.
Absolutely. I obviously want to talk about other things related to the window as well. Edu, of course, we've talked about on the show before, and kind of the stick that he's got previously. So this has obviously been another window that we've not got the primary targets that we've gone for. Mudryk, of course, was a priority target, and Caicedo became a priority target. We've not got them. And that has led to some, I think, to an extent, fair criticism of Edu. And, when you look at his history at the club, we've been in for a lot of players that we've not got. If in the summer, as we've talked about here, Declan Rice looks to be, the main priority for us in that midfield position, and you're not only going into that summer with that as the case, but you're also going into that summer with Arsenal as either, fingers crossed, Premier League champions, or at least at a minimum, established title challengers, and we'll be expecting to be title challengers again next season. There isn't going to be much to defend Edu if with a club of that stature in that kind of situation contextually can't then get its priority target, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, sorry, just had to grab the LT. So I find the Edu thing really fascinating. And I think some Arsenal fans haven't learned a lesson from, primary targets, right? Let's go back to Owen's analogy of the house. How many bids do you put in for a house? And do you always get that first house that you find? It's unlikely, right? And one of the things you said, Tom, was maybe Edu has learned his lesson in terms of having a primary, secondary, and tertiary target for players to come that can fit what Arteta wants. Let's go back and rewind a little bit, right? Lisandro Martinez was someone we wanted. Didn't get him. We got Zinchenko. Vlahovic, for everything everyone wants to say that we could get him. He didn't want to come to Arsenal, but regardless of the flirting and what happened last January, who did we end up with? Gabriel Jesus. Would we be in this position at the top of the league if it wasn't for Gabriel Jesus coming to our club? I don't think so. So there's that one. And now you look at Mudryk. Okay, is he going to be a superstar? Potentially, yes. We don't know that yet, but he looks like an incredibly talented player. We all wanted him. Not going to sugarcoat that. However, Pivot immediately signed Trossard. You don't get your midfielder you were after. You pivot, you get a guy who's played at the highest level, knows the league, won the Champions League, won, the Euros, played at the highest level. So if we had not gotten targets that were good enough, Tom, to come in and do the job, I think there'd be a huge argument to point the finger at Adu. I think when Owen said underwhelming, I don't think it's an underwhelming window if you still bring in players who you feel like can do the job. Now in the summer, will we be Premier League champions? We don't know. We'll definitely be in the Champions League. That's a brand new carrot for us to dangle in front of players. Previously, people mistake us for a small club when we're a big club who's just done small things in the league for years and years.
Yeah.
And I think that, when you look at being able to dangle that carrot, we signed Aubameyang and Lacazette and Thomas Partey and Kieran Tierney dangling the Europa League carrot. Now Arsenal have much more leverage. They have much more equity in what they're able to offer other players, top players. We're talking world-class players now. So the summer will be I'll be a little bit tougher if they don't start building for that, midfield, Thomas Partey, Xhaka, heirs to the throne. Then you also have the argument is if you win the league with Partey and Xhaka, you just going to throw two new guys in? Is Arteta what is he going to do? That to me is the most fascinating part here. In America, you break it up and start again, right? We see that in the NBA, we see that in the NFL, in the NFL especially. So I think he's going to be judged even harsher in the summer. But I think how we move forward as a club with the players that we have, if they win the league, I mean, do you want it disrupted? I'll ask you guys the question. How much of a disruption do you want if we end up winning the big one?
That's a good question. Owen, do you want to try and tackle it?
Yeah, but this is something that sort of Raj touched on earlier, and it's that with the club, the fan base, I think at times have this sort of idea in their head that if we are going for a midfielder in the region of 50 to 70 million pounds, then we have to get a midfielder in the region of 50 to 70 million pounds. Even if we miss out on one, it has to be another one in and around that price bracket, which for me is silly because, as we've mentioned numerous times, you're better off having a cheaper alternative. As Raj mentioned earlier, Jorginho's, the terms of that deal were absolutely phenomenal, in my opinion. 12 million people can say that that's expensive, but at the end of the day, that I think that's less than one of the add-ons that we were trying to apply to Mudryk's contract in that offer. So it's, when you take it into account, it's that cheap, especially when someone like Cedric Suarez moving on to help cover the wages of that deal. But look, for me, when you're going in, this is what I meant by these players were essentially squad players. And what I mean by that is that they're not coming in to continuously be squad players. But I think the most important thing for me here at this stage is, with Thomas Partey at the age that he is, and with Granit Xhaka at the age that he is as well, is that I think there has to be a phase out stage. There has to be that, next year Champions League, it isn't like Europa League where it's, play the kids on a Thursday and then play the first teamers on a Saturday, Sunday. It's going to be high level competition. We're going to need heavy reinforcements, and there's going to be plenty of game time for everybody. In fact, I think that may be something that we may struggle to adjust to. We see that a lot when teams bounce straight back into the Champions League. The squad takes some time to adjust to that. For me, when you're talking about like the rumors, the targets this summer, I would love to think that we're going to get someone like Declan Rice and Caicedo, or whoever names you want to throw out there. I think that the signing of Fernandes to Chelsea probably helps us in that sense towards getting a bit of a more clear run towards Declan Rice. But God knows what Todd Bowley is going to do. That guy is an absolute cowboy. United, obviously, as well, if they get Champions League back, they've got a prestigious name, and they're seemingly more willing to dangle the finances in front of players' faces to try and get them in the door. So, look, for me, when you look back, people always think that when you get back to the Champions Leagues, it's let's go sign the Lionel Messi's and Neymar's and Mbappe's and this and that. nobody really knew who Gabriel Magalhaes was before he signed for the club. Nobody really knew who William Saliba, Tomiyasu. Nobody really wanted Ben White. Zinchenko, people were calling him a City reject. For me, it's not about the names, and it's not about how many goals that this player is banging in on a consistent basis all the time. It's that, does the manager see them as a cog that can simply slide into this machine to help it continue rolling forward? And that's what I want to see. I always cast my mind back to the days of teletext and reading the newspaper to find out your transfer gossip. People didn't sit on the edge of their sofas all day with their phone in their face, looking at every single link, statistical analysis, and everything. You were just happy when a player.
Oh, I was there as a baby, you know.
Yeah. Teletext was great, man.
You haven't answered the question though. If Declan Rice comes to Arsenal, he's not going to sit on the bench. If we win the league, who's sitting on the bench, right?
No, but I think I sort of did answer that question, and it's that number one. No, but yeah, screw you.
So are you benching? Are you benching?
No, what I'm
Thomas?
What I'm saying is that there's room for rotation with the Champions League fixtures and the Premier League fixtures, along with obviously the domestic cup competitions as well. And I think that the level of quality required throughout the squad is much higher.
Sure.
Like for example, I don't think that we get away with Rob Holding and Mohamed El Neni in our squad when we're competing at a Champions League level anymore. Yeah, I don't think that we do that. So that's
it's hard
what I mean.
It's hard to keep players. It's the Man City model that Arteta's going after, right? We've just seen Cancelo though get peed off and leave and go to Bayern Munich. So it's a very kind of difficult.
I use the Man City example because, especially with Rice, because you look at Grealish. Grealish was signed for 100 million when they had Foden and Sterling who could play on the left-hand side. Sterling left a year later, of course, but Foden is, of course, still there. And it's about having those two quality players in every position. And I think the way you keep players happy, to an extent, it's not going to always work out. And we are going to see players leave, perhaps surprisingly. You know, I think there are players that are in the squad that, 2 years ago, we could never imagine leaving. I think Kieran Tierney is probably one of those players that will probably move on in the next year or two, maybe less. And I think that what players will join Arsenal for is they'll know that they won't get as many minutes if they're starting currently where they are every week, but they'll know that they're in a team that are going to be going for the top accolades. And that's what will convince them to join Arsenal and to fight for their place. And Arteta as well has to learn how to effectively rotate because he's never had to do that. Arteta's really only picked his best team. Yeah. He's only picked his best team every game he's played, basically, hasn't he? Like exactly. He's never, other than the Europa League and the cup competitions, in the Premier League, he's never had to learn to rotate. He's only ever picked his best team for every Premier League game. So that is going to be something that we learn from him. And maybe we'll learn it in the second half of this season because, as we've talked about, we've got Trossard, we've got Jorginho, and we're going to see rotation. Raj, I want to ask you a slightly different question. Feel free to add on your thoughts to this as well if you want to. I know you will. But I want to ask you a question that it's not a criticism, but it's something I'm a little bit concerned about the signings that we're making. Ironically, it's something that we praise a lot, and it's the strategy of signing young players, right? It's a good thing to do because obviously you invest in youth. They have sell-on value. If they don't make it, you can try and sell them on. I think Sambi Lokonga is a really good example of a problem that may start to occur at Arsenal by going down this route. Since we've signed Lokonga, we've also signed Fabio Vieira, a guy slightly younger than an already young Martin Ødegaard. And in this window, we've signed Jakub Kiwior, a slightly younger player than starter Gabriel Magalhaes. And Lokonga, and at this age, your early 20s, you have to play. Like to develop, to get better, and you need to at that age because you're not the finished article, you've got to play. And Sambi Lokonga didn't play in the end, did not get enough chances, did in a position that really wasn't his best because of needs must at times and injuries, but didn't get the opportunities playing left 8, which is probably his best role. Fabio Vieira this season is not playing enough for a 21, 22-year-old. And I fear that Kiwior won't play enough for a 22-year-old centre-back as well. Like Sophie's question there, when are we going to see the rotation? Is there an argument that whilst we are doing what we would on the surface look at as a good thing in signing young players, what do you make of this associated risk that there is that we're investing £34 million in Vieira, £22 million in Kivior to players that could see that value drop because we can't afford to bring them into the team regularly enough?
Yeah, I think the big difference with that is once you're in Champions League, you can afford to rotate a lot more in the other competitions. And kind of to what Owen said earlier, because you're going to play. Let's say you play Champions League and you play a Premier League game. That's typically going to be your top 11. But now you have multiple other competitions you can rotate players through, and so it just opens up the door and a lot more opportunities for players to play. And I think that's really the key what they're building towards for next season. Because, Edu and Arteta have both said, people laughed at it, that we want to compete in every competition, every tournament, right? And I think they're going to put out good teams, but they want to have teams, even with the backups, that are going to be competitive. And I think once they have that, he's going to be far more willing to do that more often, especially when you have Champions League and Premier League being such high intensity competition. So I think that really gets sorted next season more than anything else for that reason. To the previous topic, I think one player we missed, Ramsdale. Everyone talked poorly about him, and now he's possibly in line to be the starter, right, for the international team potentially at this rate. So it's all about fit. It's all not just about splashing cash, right? It's not FIFA Ultimate Team. It's all about how guys fit on a team. And I think we've seen with this coaching staff, they really understand how to get the best out of players and how to really get players to be cohesive on and off the pitch. And it leads to that sum greater than the parts, result. And then let's not forget one guy who's actually now leads League One in scoring, and that's Balogun, who might be coming back. That's going to be a really interesting, a great dilemma to have. He's potentially one of the top, talents currently. I mean, Hill End development has been incredible. Also gives the club a lot more. You don't have to go and spend 50, 60, 70 on two wingers, right? Because you have Saka Martinelli, you have Nketiah, you have Balogun. So you can go and spend that a lot more on high need positions.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think you answered my question well, and I think the next season will answer that question further, and I'll learn more about Arteta's capabilities in rotation and whether or not he can give the minutes to the likes of Fabio Vieira and Kivior, etc., and any other players that, of course, we're bringing in, maybe even some youngsters coming through like Charlie Patino as well that needs to be integrated. Following Balogun tonight, as we record, scored a hat-trick for once, which made him the highest goal-scoring player in Liga. We're talking more than Messi, more than Mbappe right now. So what an achievement that is so far. Playing for a team that, are competitive in the mid part, but they're not PSG, so and they rarely go a game without seeing a man sent off in their games these days. So it's a very good achievement for Balogun, and boy, has Arteta got an interesting decision to make in the summer along those lines. Of course, I want to move on to kind of the second part of the show, which we call questions for the doc. I've not actually prepped either of Sophie or Owen at the moment, so I'm kind of vamping a little bit. Sophie's usually pretty well prepared, Owen less so. So I'm going to go to his face. I'm going to go to Sophie first because I'm sure she has something ready.
Is this the Arsenal related question or the personal kind
Let's go Arsenal first. Yes.
Okay, so I really wanted the doc to help answer this question about. I remember when I can't remember what player we were linked to, Tom, and he's 28, and you were saying you were 29, and they were making you feel old, right?
Oh, Trossard,
and I mentioned Trossard, and then I mentioned Jorginho at 31. Of course, Ronaldo's a totally different specimen, but I look at a player like Luka Modric, who hasn't really required pace in his game, has been such a wonderful player and continues to play. And no one would really look at him and think, oh, Modric athletic, right? But yet here he is still playing the game. So Doc, age and Jorginho being 31, playing a lot of minutes, of course, for club and country. When I was growing up, 28 was a peak for a player, like his peak career, 28. Can you help me understand that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. I think one thing to even follow, last 3 Ballon d'Or winners have been older than 33 or older, right? So, the age
Great point.
curve, the age curve we continue to kind of push it out further and further, just because, the sports science education, we understand what it takes to get there, and the players have those resources now to really understand that. I think to your point about Jorginho, even his playing style, it's not one that's built on physicality, right? It's one built on high IQ, high awareness. I haven't looked at his heat maps, but if I looked at his heat maps, I'd be guessing they're not all over the place, right? Because he understands how to move. And so that, of course, is going to be helpful in extending that longevity for players. Modric is incredible. Modric is a guy. He's not known for his physicality, but he's known for his stamina. Like if you watch the Champions League last year, he was in the 118th minute, still making full bursting runs. But again, it's a testament to his commitment and his discipline. So, I mean, the paradigm to me, I don't understand this idea that it's actually the opposite of what people think. Players are getting better even older ages, right? So I think Xhaka's a guy who's going to be 34, 35 and keep playing at a really, really high level because we know what his off-pitch habits are like. And we know on the pitch, he's not a guy who also relies on physicality either, right? So I think he's going to be a longevity player. So I think Jorginho fits into that mold as well. And then a lot of players fit into that mold. We just know so much more when it comes to the body, the mind, and appropriate training and preparation.
Owen?
Yeah, so just to follow on for the Jorginho discussion there. So Doc, obviously Jorginho playing at Chelsea, completely different system, completely different physical demands from that system as well. We know how much emphasis Mikel Arteta puts on physical output from his players, high press and high energy, hustle and bustle style of football. With Jorginho, and I agree, as a 30-year-old, that 31 isn't isn't old yet. But if you have been training to meet a certain level of physical demands and then suddenly come into a system that demands twice as much physical output, say for example, do you think that Mikel Arteta and the coaching staff will be putting much emphasis at this stage of the season on trying to get Jorginho up to scratch, or do you think that they'll just sort of take the hit and try and bend to his sort of stylistic needs?
I think there'll be an adaptation period, right? I mean, I think the physio staff, the training staff, the sports science staff, excuse me, really understand that you have to, adapt a player to those demands. And so I think they'll know that. I think they'll also know that maybe Jorginho's type of guy, and I think, like I said, his injury record really speaks to this. He's a guy, even though he might have certain demands asked of him, right? I think his fitness levels are even higher than was just asked of him, because you don't get to the level that he's at with that injury history, playing international, playing deep into tournaments without having an extremely, extremely high fitness level, far above what just the team demands of you. So I think they already have an understanding of what his fitness is like. And, you're always going to have these back channeling where you try to get a feel for who that player is, right? Before you kind of go in for them. So if I had to guess, they already have an understanding that his fitness levels are going to be relatively high and to be able to meet those demands that they're asking of him. But if they're not, you have to adapt the player, right? Slowly, gradually ramp them up into those demands. And like you said earlier, he's not a player you're depending on to start games, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's a guy, I think really, he's a guy, if Partey's starting to struggle physically, 70th minute, you bring him on and you give Partey that break, which can be critical, just those extra 20 minutes off. I think that's going to be what you're going to see far more of if he does start games. Maybe it's Europa League games, right? Something of that nature. So that's the key thing here. It's not a guy. That's why I didn't understand the outrage. He's not a guy you're asking to start games or play a bunch of minutes. So I think that goes part and parcel with physical demands being a little bit lower too.
Is there? Can I just ask just one last one on the Jorginho thing? As you mentioned there, about the change in levels of demands and stuff. Do you think at a player of his age, would you be concerned about any potential risk of injury? Is there an increased risk of injury during this transitional period, for example?
It all depends on his previous fitness levels, right? Like if his fitness levels aren't where you want them, yeah, then increasing fitness and that adaptation period always comes with increased injury risk, right? So, but and from my understanding with how Arsenal work now, especially in the January window, I would think that they already have a pretty good understanding of where his fitness levels are, and they're not concerned about that, that differential.
Lovely stuff.
Tom,
Yeah, go on, Soph.
a quickie. If Saka's not on the pitch, does Jorginho take a penalty?
Oh, I hate his penalty style. Like, it's awful.
Is it worse than Bruno Fernandes?
Oh, nothing's worse than Bruno Fernandes. I don't think I can think of anything worse than Bruno Fernandes, to be honest. But yeah, I suppose he does. There is a reason why he takes them. He's got a decent record from the spot, clearly. I'm kind of terming these questions home and away questions. I feel like the home questions are more Arsenal related, and when we go away, we're looking more into away from Arsenal into fitness stuff. I'm going to kick off the away side, and it'll be the last three questions before we wrap up in terms of that. So, my question, Doc, is it's a bit personal, so I'm apologising already to the listeners for getting personal about this. But I recently went under a small op, which is the reason why I've not been doing any runs on Strava. People will know. Unfortunately, suffered with a couple of complications as well, and it means I'm not going to be out from running a little bit longer than I initially thought. Unfortunately, my other half, and I'm sure she won't mind me revealing this, is the moment she's like, her mental health is like on the bottom rung because she's suffered with what she suspects is a hip stress fracture, which means obviously she can't run. She loves running, she loves exercising, and her mood is so much better when she knows she can exercise. And I'm in the same position now where I can't really run right now, which is obviously for the both of us bringing us down in that level. From a cardio perspective and from burning calories perspective, what are kind of the best things you can do if you're unable to use your lower body and that you are reliant on your upper body to do as much cardio as you can?
I mean, they have one of, I don't know if you've ever seen them or if you have access to like the machines where like the arm cycle
Yes.
can be quite effective. I've done that. I mean, I've had multiple lower body surgeries, so I've had to do that kind of in the short term. So that's one thing. I mean, even you can still do upper body lifting too, and you do it kind of more in a circuit format too, get your heart rate going, right, with less breaks and more reps, just to get that exertion going as well. So those two things I think would be key in terms of once you're able to even going on a cycle or a recumbent cycle potentially, which doesn't really put much pressure on your feet once you're cleared for that, can be the next step after that too.
Lovely stuff. I'll go in reverse order. Owen, have you got an away question?
Not quite yet. Sophie can fire away, and I'll
you go for it. See, I told you what I mean.
Do you know? I have a confession to make. When Owen sent that picture in our WhatsApp group earlier, at first I was like, "Wow, Owen's legs and he's tan. The dude looks amazing." And
I just go on the sunbeds from the waist down.
And then I saw the tattoo, and I didn't click on it. I didn't see Jesus' name at the very top. So, okay. So my question is, I was doing so well, as you guys know. The last episode I was on, I was talking about during games using my bands and things like that to alleviate the stress. And I went to London Dock, and everything went Pete Tong. I lost my discipline. I lost my mind. I ate everything. I drank everything. I hadn't been drinking since before Christmas, and so now I'm trying to get back on the train. But there's some personal stuff going on that is also exceptionally stressful. And when things are stressful, I eat. I find comfort in food. Any tips for me?
Don't find comfort in food. I'm just kidding. That's a tough one.
Happier, so just be happier.
That's a tough one. It's honestly a tough one. It's really, really tough one. Because that's such a habit for you, right? And so I would say maybe try to find foods that are still relatively healthy, but that you still like, right? So if you do find comfort in food, maybe have it be something that's not maybe quite as, I'm assuming you mean it's food that's relatively not.
Yeah, I'm not a chocolate person. I'm not like a junk food person. I just eat more of what I like, right? I just eat.
Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
don't really. I like a dessert though. Like I had a creme brulee last night.
Oh,
It was so good. It was good. But I also had Mexican food, and I had breakfast, and it's a lot of food for me. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. That's such a tough one because it's an ingrained habit. So, I mean, you just have to be really intentional with that. I think, and try. It's not going to be. There's no easy fix there, right? Because
mm.
there's that connection that you have with it. So, I would say if you want to have it, try to limit your portions on it, right? If possible, because sometimes if you just having some of it might still kind of hit the spot, but have one burrito instead of two, and maybe you're okay.
Have one In-N-Out burger instead of two. You're right. You're
Yeah.
right. So
Oh,
Exactly.
those
It's the
In-N-Out
small
burgers.
changes, man. That's it. To go
Yeah.
for a normal size chocolate bar, not a sure size one. That's what I've been
Yeah,
doing.
yeah. I keep having like a Boost Duo. I just need a normal Boost. Like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
duos are just doing me in. I think from my perspective, I'm really bad at snacking. Like snacking's terrible, and I've told Georgia just like stop buying it, get it out of the house. Like, and she's like, well, I need like mine in between meals, and I was like, all right, well, take them and keep them at work. Don't have them here because if they're here, I work from home. I'll eat them. Like if I see them,
Self-control, Tom.
I have no willpower and none. And one of the other things is like if you're struggling like because you're feeling like hungry, is that I try and drink as much water because water's just so filling as well. So the more water you drink as well, I think it helps with kind of staving off hunger cravings, if you like. And water's great for you. So there you go. Right. Owen, have you got an away question to finish off the show?
Of course I do. Of course I do. And this doesn't apply to me. I'm balling, by the way. Okay, just to let everybody know that. But no. On a serious note, Doc, obviously, I think probably globally, at this moment in time, I think there's a lot of people struggling financially. Obviously, we've got the energy costs are through the roof, the fuel cost, literally the cost of living is absolutely sky high, and people are struggling. And one thing that I've noticed going through diets and stuff like that is that it's actually surprisingly expensive at times to maintain a fresh, healthy diet to a certain extent. It's much more cheaper to go and buy a packet of 2 pizzas for £1.50 from the frozen aisle in one of these mega stores and stuff like that. But if you were somebody
Midway kebabs, 2 pizzas for a £5. It's bloody good.
yeah, man, it's wild. It's a problem. But if you were somebody, say, for example, on an extremely low income that was trying to get into fitness and was put off by the high prices of all these kinds of things, what are the types of meals that you would be going for to try and sort of combat that cost?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is, when it comes to buying nutritious food, you don't have to go to the complete opposite end, completely organic, whatever it is, right? Even being a little bit more healthy is an incremental step, right? So instead of, having the fried chicken, you can maybe go buy something that's not fried instead, right? So those incremental steps in that regard are the key. Because so often I'll see people, they want to go fully organic, all natural. That's exorbitantly expensive, like all natural range chicken, whatever that means. But it's like $22, right, for
The
one
chickens that
drumstick,
can actually
whatever.
fly. That's what they are.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just trying to find. I mean, the improvement is always relative. So I always try to say, right, even if it's if there's a small margin there and it's still relatively more healthy, you have to start there. You have to start somewhere because once you see even incremental change in health is still a positive change in health, and I think you have to be comfortable with that. And then a lot of it comes back to expectations, almost like the Arsenal transfer window. It's like your expectation just has to be incremental, not just pie in the sky. Hey, we're gonna get everyone we want, right? And so I think you have to be comfortable with that process and establish that on the front end, rather than just going like you talked about for fully healthful, all full produce. Just ideally we would all love that, and with it, there's no financial constraint, but it's just not the reality. So just look for something a little bit healthier.
Yeah, like from my perspective, I kind of go back to uni days for stuff like that when I lived on a budget. and trying to lose weight. I've got some friends of mine that, because as you say, the cost of living crisis is mad at the moment. And I've got people close to me that are struggling, and, that are also trying to be healthy and lose weight. And you get kind of this obsession with following like fitness bloggers and physiotherapists, those damn physiotherapists, like on Instagram and stuff, where like their perfect meals that look great. And in reality, if you were to have one of those meals a day, whilst it'd be great for you, the cost is, as you say, Matt. I think you need to make bulk meals. You utilize your freezer. We've always got a freezer. Do a massive pasta dish, not make it whole meal pasta, brown pasta instead, rather than the white stuff. So I think that's as Doc says, those incremental changes to meals, just sub out things for healthier versions, buy it in bulk, freeze it, store it, and come back to it, because you can get.
And sometimes you'll be surprised when you do that. It's cheaper than like if you order a regular pizza warm nowadays, you get 2 pizzas. It's like and whatever, it's $50.
Yeah.
So
and I think also, like you say, pizza. Like some people I think some people have misrepresentations of what bad food is. Like it's always important to check like the stuff on the back of the box, because things that sometimes you think are bad aren't actually as bad as you think. So sorry, Sophie.
I always remember.
No, I make a big.
Sorry. What I was just going to say is
no.
The thing that gives me hope is, I'm not sure any of us remember this viral trend years ago, but the rice and fish, the rice and fish cakes, dude.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rice and a fish cake.
Have you seen him recently?
Hold on, is it fish and a rice cake? Not rice and a fish cake, yeah.
Is it?
Is he
fish
huge?
cake? Good.
Fish and a rice cake. He's now like a big bodybuilder, yeah.
That gives me hope.
Yeah.
Like today, I'm going to make a big bowl. I'm going to make a bowl of cauliflower rice, and I've got courgettes and zucchini. Sorry, courgettes and eggplant, and I've got a little chicken in the freezer. Going to defrost that, chop it up, put it in a massive rice bowl. Have enough for tonight and lunch tomorrow and dinner tomorrow night.
There you go.
That's my goal.
Cook in bulk. It works.
And one last thing. I mean, one thing, just general kind of budgeting, like. I would write down what you're spending money on and then actually look at it, right? Because I just if you're going in, I'll mention Starbucks again because I always have to once per.
Other coffee houses are available.
But like, a Starbucks is like $4.50. So if you're going there every 2 days, actually write down what you're spending.
Is
scary.
I remember when we were going for our mortgage. As I mentioned, we were sat down with our mortgage advisor and our financial advisor and structured out all of our outgoings, and the money that we were left over with every month, I was blown away by. And when I worked out how much I was spending at lunch and work, and it's just shocking the amount of money you spend on absolute nonsense.
Yeah. As I say to people, if you can do 1 month of writing down all the things you bought, you can go back and work out what you're overspending on so easily. Working from home, getting like an Uber Eats was such a dangerous thing for me. Go on, Raj.
Yeah, I would say, maybe you don't need every streaming service known to man, right?
Yeah. I have I honestly, my subscriptions are a joke. Like they're actually a joke, and I've tried to get rid of so many, but like I've like 3. I've like Apple Music, Spotify, and Amazon. I don't need all 3, but it's like I like the Apple Music because I have an iPhone, but I prefer Spotify, and I need Amazon Music for my Alexa. Like it's a joke how I use all of these things, and they all do the same thing. Anyway, we are going to wrap things up there on that silly admission of mine. I'm going to get so much hate in the comments for that. Thank you everybody for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed, of course, and welcome back, Sophie and Owen from your travels in the UK, of course. I hope you enjoyed our Q&A with the doc last week as well. We are going to try and do more Q&A stuff as much as we can in the future. So if you have questions that you've got off the back of this show, then do leave them down below and we'll try and tackle them. Sophie, thank you so much for your time. As I say at the start, it was an absolute pleasure to see you as always, and I look forward to seeing you in a few months, hopefully, fingers crossed. Tell people where they can find you.
At Highbury Squad, give us a listen. Did a great show with Toffee TV on Monday in Super Kev ahead of the Everton game. Stay safe, everyone, and thanks again, Tom, for having me.
Beautiful. Owen, always a pleasure, and likewise, it was great to see you and share some duck with you the other day.
It was. It was a deceased duck.
Yeah, it wasn't like a mallard we just picked up off.
Yeah. No, it was great to finally attend Canton's Chinese. It's a great family establishment you have there. But no, it was a pleasure, buddy. I can't wait to get back over.
Indeed. No, I look forward to seeing you soon again. And although he wasn't there, we certainly celebrated him in spirit. Raj, it's been a pleasure to join you, of course, as always. Tell people where they can find you, my friend.
You find me at 3CB Performance on pretty much all social media channels. And let's go beat Everton.
Absolutely. I should say you can find Owen as well at Owen Young AFC and on the Gooners pods, of course, too, semi-regularly. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Appreciate your time. Subscribe if you're new. Drop a like on the video. You can find us on socials at the Gooner Talk TV and myself at Tom Canton Media. And we will see you next week for the next episode. Have a fantastic week. Stay healthy, stay safe. And as always, up the Arsenal.